Hi, Simply Vegas agent. This is how to correctly complete a request for repairs. We'll look at the top of the form. You'll see there is a request for repair number. The number 1's going to go in there if this is your first time you've executed the form. That will continue if you have additional requests for repairs afterwards. In reference to the residential purchase agreement, that's the date that's going in there is the date that's on the first page of the purchase agreement right at the top of the right, the initial date of the purchase agreement, not the date that it was accepted and not the date of counters. That is the initial date of the purchase agreement. Then you have the property address and then who executed it. As we've been through before, if it's executed in the name of a trust or an LLC, that needs to go in there and then specified as trustees. Coming down, we've got a couple of different options. Option number 1, if your buyer, which almost never happens, if your buyer completely approves the property inspection, then they are removing the home inspection contingency. You can also just not submit this form if they completely approve it and just let due diligence run out. If they do not approve it, then we're going to the second box right here. And this is where you put in your requests. A couple of things to do. Obviously, you're referencing specific parts of the property inspection. I do like to see the property inspection accompanying this form in an email. I think that that's very important so we know what's referencing. And then you can use language that's similar to the inspection report. However, sometimes if it's identical, it's a little strange. For example, the inspector might suggest something, whereas your buyer would like that done. So therefore, buyer requests rather than buyer suggests is the verbiage that you should be using for your request for repairs. Also in this section, we need to specify if you want the repairs done by a licensed contractor and also specifying that you want receipts for the repairs. Going down to the next field, you'll see what's included and attached in this email. So if you've attached the property inspection, you're going to check that box and put property inspection, put the date on there of that property inspection, as well as the inspector that completed it. This is where your buyer signature is going. So next part is the response from the seller. If you represent the seller and you're agreeing to complete all of the repairs, you're going to mark the top box. Second one is if you're not doing any repairs, you say we're not going to do it. That's obviously the second box. And then if there are bits and pieces that you will and won't do, that all needs to be specified in the section below it. Again, if it's going to be not completed by a licensed contractor, something like that, please specify in detail. Obviously gets date and signed by the seller there. The next and most important part of this form that gets missed is it then has to be re-responded to by the buyer. So if you represent a buyer in the transaction, you need to have your buyer read through this response. And even if this response says, we'll fix everything, your buyer then needs to say, I agree that you agree to fix everything. It sounds redundant, but is required, and this form is not completed and properly executed until it has the third round of signatures on it. Obviously, the rest of these fields are self-explanatory. If your buyer is responding and saying, I don't like what you're doing, he or she needs to cancel the purchase agreement at the time of this during the due diligence period. There is also no automatic extension of due diligence for this form. So if due diligence runs out prior to the seller responding to a request for repairs, you need to either have that due diligence extended or you need to cancel escrow until it's sorted out. There is no automatic extension of due diligence in this form. If you request an extension separate to this, the seller needs to reapprove it. And so that part can be pre-printed on the form for the seller to either accept or deny. Again, if you haven't had this signed back and due diligence is running out, you need to either send over and get signed an extension of due diligence or cancel the transaction. It's imperative you do one of those two things. That's it for this form. Pretty easy. Thanks, guys.